perfectly sound way. I also want to thank you for your courage and bravery in the face of this sort of lawless intimidation tactic, right? And I think this is something that you are rightfully outraged by, and we should all be not concerned. We should all be like alarmed at what's happening right now in this Trump administration. This is, to be clear, this is not law enforcement. It is intimidation, full stop. When the government threatens journalists or critics for doing their jobs, they're not protecting order. It's a warning to stay quiet. And so the worst thing you can do in the face of that is to stay quiet. So kudos to you for not doing that. And we should use you as an example for every other journalist to speak loud and proud about doing their job. The First Amendment exists to protect offensive and critical speeches, right? Like that's the point. It's not there to make sure that people say nice things. It means the right to say things that anger or speak truth to those in power. Weaponizing access and regulation is censorship in disguise. And when press access and approvals depend on some sort of editorial sort of niceties to an administration, that is authoritarianism, and that's when we've lost democracy. And honestly, we need, enough is enough. We need people to be freaking out about what this administration is doing across many levels, but in particular towards journalists. So I'm deeply, deeply, deeply alarmed about how you have been treated here and how this just seems to be part of a much more troubling pattern that I don't see abating anytime soon.
Joy Reid, we have very similar paths from corporate media to independent journalists, and you're quickly growing YouTube and show with hundreds of thousands, if not millions of subscribers. What do you make of all of this and this assault on journalism?
Absolutely. Well, I first want to thank the panel for having me. It's great to be with this panel. And thank you, my friend Don Lemon, who I've been texting. Like, I am not Don Lemon's mom or auntie, but I've been texting him like, Don, are you okay? Like, I probably feel like I text him once an hour just to make sure no one is coming at him. So I appreciate everything you did. I want to echo every word that Colby said, because had you and I still been working at our corporate media jobs, and I recall being sent to South Carolina to cover the agonistes over bringing down the Confederate flag. And it was a huge fight over that. There were people who literally were all but chaining themselves to the Confederate flag monument and refusing to get away from it because they didn't want that flag brought down. Can you imagine if the protesters on both sides of that issue, if Governor Nikki Haley had said, go and arrest the journalists, who I was interviewing people who were in full regalia of the Confederacy. They were wearing their Confederate uniforms, their throwback uniforms. And we walked up to them and interviewed them because that is our job. When I was there, because I was in the midst of these protests on either side of that issue, that is not a crime. It is literally the job of journalism. And what you've been doing in going to these sites of protest and interviewing people, as Colby said, including the pastor, including the people who were on the other side of that issue, and including some of the people who organized that protest. I'm not sure what Pam Bondi thinks journalism is, but that's what it is. And I really just want to quickly, and everyone knows this, but I just want to read the First Amendment, just so that people can be reminded. I'm really going to be grandma right now, and I'm going to take out my First Amendment and read it to you. It says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. Therefore, nothing that was happening inside that church was a crime. If they want to try to come up with a crime for protesting, if the folks who own the church want to charge trespass or something like that, you can litigate that. But the reality is the protests were constitutionally sound. The journalism was constitutionally sound. And the only reason that Pam Bondi's Department of Injustice has decided to try to prosecute you is probably because Donald Trump told her to. And we no longer have a Justice Department because Pam Bondi, has decided that her job is not to pursue justice without fear or favor. Her job is to do whatever it is Donald Trump is telling her to do in the moment. And whoever annoys Donald Trump or makes him angry or makes him sad or doesn't kiss his ass, she prosecutes them or attempts to prosecute them, to punish them for doing things he doesn't like. And the last thing I'll add here is that I spent most of today watching the Jack Smith testimony before a congressional committee. And I watched Republicans attempt to spin the attack on the Capitol on January 6th, 2021, as First Amendment protected free speech. So what we're now saying is that conservatives believe that physically attacking the Capitol, hitting police officers like Michael Fanone with stun guns, bear spray, and baseball bats, defecating in the Capitol, smashing the windows of the Capitol, literally destroying the Capitol's edifice, that doing that is First Amendment protected free speech, slamming those officers in doorways, beating them with their fists, nearly killing Mike Fanone, nearly killing other officers, injuring 140 police officers, and leaving 6 people dead. That is protected free speech. But a protest in a church at which no one is harmed or killed, and covering that protest as a journalist, that's a crime. We are in Putin Navalny territory. This is the way Russia operates. It's the way North Korea and China operate. It is not supposed to be the way the United States of America operates.
Thank you, Joy. Erin Haynes, the president of the National Association of Black Journalists, and thank you for your support, and thank you for the statement and for standing behind me. What is so what do you make on this assault on the First Amendment and this assault really on journalism? And especially, and I want to put this in, Erin, and we have to remember, let's be honest, in this Trump era, a lot of Black journalists have lost their jobs, whether it is in print or on television or in radio or whatever it is. A lot of Black journalists have lost their jobs. So talk to us about all of that.
Don, that's absolutely right. I mean, listen, we know that part of these attacks on diversity, equity, and inclusion include attacks on journalists of color who we know have been disproportionately impacted in this anti-DEI climate, right? And so we must push back against that, because if we do not have a truly representative press, how can we have a truly free press? And how can we have a truly healthy democracy? We know that these issues are tied together, right? That democracy and a free press and diversity, those things are not mutually exclusive. They rise and fall together, as do the rest of us, right? These are issues that should frankly concern and alarm all Americans, right? We do know, right? We know that for Black journalists, the stakes can be even higher, right? Because we are often the ones that are on the front lines, right? Covering policing, covering immigration enforcement, covering civil rights, covering systemic inequality, the very places where accountability is most needed, right? So when institutions avoid moral clarity in these moments, it is Black journalists and the communities that we serve who feel the consequences of that. And that is part of the reason why we stood up for you. But we know that this is a broader issue of press freedom. We know that this is about press integrity. You were at that church because that is where the news was happening. And this is what's happening. You know, we're seeing what's playing out right now, like journalists doing their jobs, covering protests, documenting government action, bearing witness in moments of public tension, are increasingly having their credibility challenged and their safety threatened. People like you, people like Joy, who are our highest profile trailblazers in this new independent media ecosystem, are being targeted for a reason. They want to silence, they want to chill people like you who are out here, who are telling the truth independently. When you said that you were going to Minneapolis over the weekend, I knew that that meant that we were going to get an honest and accurate record of what was happening on the ground. So recent public warnings aimed at people like you for covering a protest should really concern anybody who believes in a free and independent press, because honestly, that kind of rhetoric sends a really chilling message that journalism itself can be.
Thank you for that, Aaron. I want to put this up. I spoke to, or at least texted because she's on a plane on her way to Sundance, Sharon Waxman, who is the founder of the Wrap. And Sharon gave me this statement. She says, as a founder of the Wrap, I said, do you come on tonight? She goes, no, I'm on a plane. She goes, but this is what's happening. She talked about press freedom and rights. She says, they're whittling away, or perhaps more like a buzzsaw. People like you can't be intimidated. We will not be intimidated, but you are very front line. I will support to my last breath. Honestly, many of the not so silent majority and much of the press stands with you.
She's exactly right, Don. She's exactly right. And I know that you know this, but I just want to point out for folks watching that not only did NABJ issue a statement, but many of our allies in journalism and beyond are standing with the issue of press freedom and press integrity, from the American Society of Journalists and Authors to the Association of Foreign Correspondents, the Committee to Protect Journalists, the Freedom of the Press Foundation, Journalism and Women's Symposium. The Hispanic journalists are with us, the Arab and Middle Eastern journalists, the Asian American journalists. PEN America is with us, the Radio, Television, Digital News Association, Reporters Without Borders. I could go on and on. The Association of LGBTQ plus journalists. All of these folks are standing with us because they know that this is an issue of press freedom. This is about all of us, not only as journalists in our profession, but also about the founding ideals of this country, which we must mention as we head into our 250th anniversary. Free press is foundational to that, as Joy pointed out, in our founding documents. And so that could be under threat, that could be wielded and weaponized in an attempt to intimidate the press, that is something that we must push back against, and that we are seeing a growing number of groups pushing back against, and we invite more people to join us and to stand with us.
Thank you very much. Now, I do know that one of my guests has a time issue. So, Charles, if you have to go, just let us know. And
I'm able to extend for a little while, but it gives me such comfort to see Aaron and Joy on and hear their commentary. I think it's really important to connect the dots for your viewers. We've been talking about the press, but I think from an industry perspective, and Joy and you can fill in the blanks here, can really sort of connect the dots for your viewers in terms of understanding. Let's think for a moment. Don Lemon, you are a streaming independent journalist. You are not right now affiliated with any sort of legacy corporate media platform. Why is there so much focus on you individually? It's because in this day and age, the work that needs to be done around legacy platforms and media from this administration has already been done. And again, for people who don't understand how to read between the lines on that, I'll let Joy and Don sort of fill that in. When it comes to legacy corporate media, a lot of that work has already been done. This administration understands the value of independent media and citizen journalism and people who don't necessarily have direct bosses and can't be told what they can and cannot say or what the slant is or is not. And so when you have that level of independence and you have even a modicum of resources, it represents a different type of danger coming out of the fourth branch of government. It represents a different type of exposure with respect to being able to truth tell and story tell that is not so easily controlled, particularly in this environment around where media continues to move and where it continues to shift. And so for people who don't really understand, there is a reason why Joy, why independent journalism right now is so incredibly important in the media landscape. And this administration understands that. And it's also very characteristic of how we have seen the executive branch continue to try and weaken every other aspect of government. And I referred to media in the press as the fourth branch because that's essentially how they function. But for people who do not realize in this moment, you can look in recent history. You talked about it in your lead-in, Don, think about Ferguson and how important citizen journalism and independent journalists were to telling those stories before they broke nationally. Think about Trayvon Martin and Sanford, Florida. Before those things had broken nationally. There were journalists who were on the ground who weren't necessarily affiliated with legacy or corporate media in the ways that you would expect, who were breaking that story, saying this is going to be big before it became a national story. This is how movement has always functioned, particularly with the advancement of technology. And this administration understands that. So for your audience, I just want to underscore how critically important independent journalists like yourself are, like Joy are, because of the fact that there's not a need for validation from some of these other platforms. I mean, that you have them is great, but it's not necessary. And this administration is very, very, very understanding of that. So when your audience is thinking about where they get their news, how they get their news, understand that they know, this administration knows how critical you all are to that pipeline, which is why you're getting so much of the focus that you are. And I suspect it will continue among other independent and citizen journalists that we will see try to storytell and give us the truth on the ground where the news is.
Thank you very much. A lot of folks on this panel, if you guys can just hold for a minute, if you have to leave, you guys can go, but I want to do this because I have to. I got to stay independent and I got to pay my bills on these things. So stand by. A word from our sponsors. We're back in 2 minutes. This episode of the Don Lemon Show is brought to you by Graza. Everyone I know, everyone knows I love to cook, especially when I'm hosting friends. And lately, what's taken my food really up to the next level is Graza olive oil. Graza is my everyday olive oil. It's fresh, it's affordable, and it's easy to use. They pick, press, and bottle their olives all in the same season, and you can actually see the harvest date on every single bottle. They've got 2 oils that I always keep on hand. It's Sizzle. It's perfect for cooking, roasting, sauteing.
What do you make of this, Phil? The reports are that this magistrate judge in Minneapolis has declined to sign a warrant for his arrest, apparently not persuaded by the criminal complaint filed by the DOJ that attempted to make a showing of probable cause. I'm just going to guess that it would have been the same 2 charges as we've seen against the earlier 2, one under the FACE Act, which if it's a first violation is a misdemeanor, and one under the Klan Act, which is a conspiracy against rights, somebody else's attempt to exercise their civil rights.
Well, this reeks of politics. I can smell it here in Atlanta all the way coming from Minnesota today. Trespassing is a crime. The First Amendment does not give Don Lemon a shield against violating the rights of other people. Merely holding a microphone and calling yourself a journalist might make you a journalist within the meaning of the Fourth Amendment, but it doesn't mean that you get to use it as a defense to violate other people's First Amendment rights. It's important to understand, Megan, magistrate judges, federal magistrate judges, they are not appointed by...
Over some ice cream. So I use both constantly, and they look great sitting out on the counter as well. So you can get 20% off of your first order when you go to graza.co and use the code LEMON. I recommend the duo Sizzle and Drizzle together. So that's graza.co and use the code LEMON. The Don Lemon Show is brought to you by the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Now, I've said this before, that equality under the law only works when the government stays neutral. The First Amendment wasn't written to protect one religion. It was written to protect all of us. And right now, that promise is under real threat from Christian nationalists who believe their beliefs should control everyone's lives. The Freedom from Religion Foundation is pushing back, defending students, families, communities from religious coercion. So if you believe freedom means freedom for everyone, then you need to join them. And here's how you do it. You go to ffrf.us/New Year, or you can text DON, that's D-O-N, to 511-511. Again, that's ffrf.us/New Year, or text DON to 511-511. Text fees may apply. And we are back. Thank you so much to our sponsors. Okay, I don't want to enrage anybody, but I want to play this because I want to know how I became the focus of the story and somehow I became a protester in this. So, ladies and gentlemen, one Megyn Kelly.
I want everyone in jail. I want all of them arrested.
You are a fake Christian.
This is the red line, and they've crossed it.
I mean, this is unacceptable. It's shameful.
Don Lemon lectured half of the parishioners about how they really had an obligation to sit there and fucking take it.
These are resistance protesters. They're planning an operation that we're going to follow them on.
Some people are too dumb to be allowed to do the news.
There's a constitution and a First Amendment to freedom of speech and freedom to assemble and protest.
He's too dumb and doesn't know shit about the law or the U.S. Constitution.
People here don't like it, but protests are not comfortable.
Has no fucking clue what he is saying to that pastor there. You're going to learn the hard way, sir, how wrong you are.
Look, he's hugging his kid. I just imagine it's uncomfortable and traumatic for the people here. That's what protesting is about.
You're too stupid to understand the law, but this one also happens to be illegal. You know how it's illegal to harass people, to show up at the abortion clinic? You're not allowed to do that. Well, guess what? That same law also applies to places of worship. There are some very limited, but this is one of them, limits on your First Amendment rights. This is the line beyond which we cannot allow them to cross. I don't care if it takes the National Guard, if it takes all of Pam Bondi's DOJ, if it takes President Trump personally making a visit to this church. I don't care what has to be done, but this is the red line, and they've crossed it.
Woo, lady, calm down. I'm going to say something that would tick people off. She'd be a lot prettier if she smiled. I'm kidding. I know that.
I will never forgive you for making me watch her. But anyway, go on.
I know, I'm sorry. You know what? I
Never.
used to have a rule on this show that we would not, but finally I was just like, enough. And that happened, Joy, when I came to your defense. Do you remember that?
I
And then
remember.
I had to read
I
it.
approved of that message.
Yeah. And so, anyways.
We'll never get those minutes back. But since she talked about the law, Don, if I could just talk about a little law for a minute, because she's off as always. Something that Charles was saying is exactly where I would love to see people like Queen Erin and all of the associations that are working with NABJ. I would like to see you drop anchor there, because freedom of speech and freedom of the press, some people think they're coextensive and we say them all at the same time, but it's two different separate things that the Supreme Court has over and over again pointed out. This was not an accident. This wasn't a coinky-dink. They wrote these things separately and it was not constitutional error, right? They're two separate things that are supposed to be protected. And the Supreme Court has said over and over again that it is illegal to target specific types of media, that you can't create laws or pursue certain subsets of the press and treat them differently than other ones. And what I am seeing quite clearly is that independent journalists are being targeted by this administration because, to Charles's point, they've already killed off the mainstreams. I mean, at the point that you let yourself get kept out of the Oval, kept out of the briefing room, and you don't sue immediately, and you aren't protesting every day, and you aren't refusing to do anything that has anything to do with the media, they're winning. They're winning the mainstream battle. But there are protections already in place in the law. And I think one of the cases is Grosjean. I don't remember the name of it now, but my point is this has been addressed over and over again as the look of the media and the look of reporting and the press started to grow and evolve and change. And the Supreme Court over and over again has said, well, no, you can't mandate that the government turn over this or this, and you have to go with the Freedom of Information Act. So they've made certain limits, but in other areas they're saying no, you can't go after Joy and Don because they don't work for CBS or MSNBC or ABC. They haven't said it the way that I just said it, but that's the law that I'm looking for. So I hope somebody sues.
Colby Hall, I think they look, people like Megyn Kelly, I believe they know better. Why? And I guess, do they feel? Why do you think you've been covering media? That's your thing, is to cover media. How did I become the focus of this story?
What do you think it is about you that Megyn Kelly doesn't like, right? Like, what do you think that is? And maybe it's tied to, I don't know, remember back, was it 2008, where she was really obsessed with the Black Panthers that were sort of protecting the polling booths outside of Philadelphia? Turns out to be two guys, and she made it a big, big story. Or maybe as she told me, she told kids that were watching her Fox News show, not to worry, Santa's really white. or when she defended going in blackface, for Halloween. There is a pattern here. She's gone after you repeatedly, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what is she doing? She is playing, it's a dog whistle. She is playing very irresponsibly, and I think quite disgustingly, she is playing sort of outrage games with people who want to hear that. She is getting clicks, and unfortunately, one of the downsides of the independent media ecosystem is that the way to get clicks is to stay on the extremes and to make people angry, because people are isolated. They want to hear thoughts that make them feel good about this. But, enough about Megyn Kelly. We don't need to talk about her because she's not someone who deserves this much attention. I want to just say one real quick thing about the independent media. Corporate media have absolutely sort of bended knee to the Trump administration. They have settled lawsuits that were total bullshit, not because they were principled, but they were business decisions. And journalism is not meant to be a business deal, right? ABC gave millions of dollars. CBS spent $16 million to Viacom so that this Paramount thing could go through, right? To echo what everyone is saying, the reason they're going after you is that there's no control over independent media. They have no yoke on you. And that's exactly why independent voices has never been more important, and also the bravery and courage to speak truth to power. That's the essence of journalism. So there's never been a better time to have a voice like you, Dawn, and Joy, and everyone else out there. And by the way, this is not a partisan issue. This is a principle issue, right? If a Democratic administration was arresting a conservative media person who was doing proper journalism, there should be and would be just as much alarm and outrage. And
that has happened. Do you remember when, James Rosen, what was his name when they lost under a Democratic president?
Another guy who we don't need to talk about.
Yeah.
We don't talk about him.
Yeah.
Can I just say, Dawn, that to the point that everyone I think has made, and I think everyone agrees, the reason that it is you that they're going after and not one of the networks, I think, to the points that Charles and Colby have made, and I think that are absolutely true, is that if you go back to the first Gulf War, this is the establishment of this idea of embedding journalists. This was kind of the first time that in my, at least adult lifetime, when you saw the mainstream media sort of cross the line into playing ball and assisting an administration in telling its war stories, or not since, the sort of little films they used to show during World War II, the little propaganda films, little government propaganda films they used to show in movie theaters during World War II. And we've seen that kind of proximity to the government's story about the war. And that was because that was designed to fix the Vietnam problem, right? Where Walter Cronkite, the most trusted man in America, eventually comes out and, having been there, said, wait a minute, this war is unwinnable, shocking the nation and ruining support for the war. And the government always wants the media to be compliant. They want the media to give them positive coverage that simply affirms what they're trying to say. But what you've seen with this administration is that they have completely neutered much of the mainstream media, both because of the settlements and because, to be honest, these media companies, the journalism piece of it is just a part of their business. They've got other business they want to do that they need regulatory relief for, right? They need to be able to do mergers and acquisitions. They've got other businesses before the government. And so they're all sort of delivering coverage that is watered down from what you would get had they been, in the situation they were before Donald Trump got elected, right? They don't feel they can be as tough. So you get what CBS is doing, where without sources, two anonymous sources tell them that the ICE agent who shot Renee Nicole Good had internal injuries. That's good enough for Bari Weiss. It wasn't good enough for her when 60 Minutes had a thoroughly legal and thoroughly completed story that was ready to go that didn't have enough. So what's happening is the mainstream is knuckling under. And so what you're getting is what happens, quite frankly, in Israel, where when I was working at MSNBC, the major networks could not go into Gaza without the permission of the Israeli government, and the coverage was so limited and truncated so that only the story that the Netanyahu administration wanted out would get out through mainstream media. How did so many people become outraged by what was happening in Gaza? It was independent journalists. It was individual Palestinians who in some cases weren't even formally journalists. They were just live streaming their own murders, their own deaths, their own bombings, the bombings of their communities. That independent journalism shook an entire nation from left to right, from MAGA to progressive, are in many ways now on the same page when it comes to Gaza.
The Arab
they were
Spring,
outraged
right?
equally. Absolutely. The Arab Spring was the same thing. What regimes fear is independent media, because independent media tells the stories that the mainstream media suppresses on behalf of the regime.
Yeah, and if I can just jump in here, because Don, you know, when you are somebody that is able to take your audiences from Bourbon Street to the front lines of a protest to see what's going on, you are onto something. And those who would seek to be the gatekeepers of what journalism is or is not supposed to be, they know that you are onto something. And that is why you are being targeted, are being singled out. Our industry has got to push back against these narrow, exclusionary attempts to define professionalism. This is about trying to undermine your dignity, your credibility, your legitimacy. That's not going to happen. It's not going to happen on my watch. I'll tell you that. I really think it is so important to point this out. I mean, listen, we can talk about, you know, what people may think healthy debates about actual journalistic practice are. We know what that is. We here know what that is, right? But disparagement, trying to undermine your dignity, your credibility, that is not up for debate or discussion. And, you know, NABJ, I will say that we encourage newsrooms, we encourage journalists, we encourage media consumers to engage these moments more thoughtfully, to recognize the value of diverse voices and diverse perspectives and honest and accurate journalism and independent media that is collectively strengthening this profession, especially in a moment where some are looking away. You being on the ground in a moment where not everyone is, helping these local journalists who are telling the story but are not breaking through in the way that you are able to break through. That is the thing that is drawing folks' attention who would seek to try to define what you are doing as anything other than exactly what it is: professional journalism conducted with integrity. I didn't see anything approaching harassment in the question that you were asking, trying to hold power to account. That is what you were doing in a place where news was happening.
Thank you very much. And thank you guys. Did everybody get their piece in? Because I'm just sitting here. Yeah, I thinking that I could not have asked for a better panel. And I'm not crying. It's from my radiator. My voice is scratchy. You know what I'm talking about. If anybody's going to get a screen grab of me, this is not tears of that at all. This is just my eyes watering. But if you live in New York City and you have an old school radiator, you know what I'm talking about. It's so
really dry. It's dry as hell.
Did you guys, anybody want to say anything before we get out of here?
Can I just add one more thing, because on the idea of these protests, because it is chilling. And I think whatever your politics are, whatever your political party is, you should be alarmed at the idea of your government attempting to use the highest, the sort of its awesome power of the state to stop people from protesting. I'm old enough to remember when people showed up to protest against President Obama, our first Black president, with long guns, standing opposite the Capitol with long guns, and they were fully protected by the First Amendment to stand there in this threatening posture against the President of the United States. There was nothing you could do. Up until the point where they broke into the Capitol, as much as I detest MAGA, those protests were perfectly legal. As they were screaming obscenities and chanting, "Hang Mike Pence," they were protected by the First Amendment up until the point where they started literally attempting to kill police officers. When you think about the protests during the Tea Party movement, which were vile, they were holding monkey dolls and hanging in effigy the first Black president of the United States. Perfectly protected on the First Amendment. Understand the broad protections of the First Amendment. They don't just protect left, they protect the right too. So if those those of y'all in MAGA think you want to live in a world where the Department of Justice can prosecute you for protesting because your protest is loud, or because your protest annoys some people who are sitting in a building, or your protest is inconvenient to people, rue the day when there is a Trump on the other side who decides to wield the awesome power of the government against you. Because anything you think you're satisfied with seeing done to your opponents can be done to you too. Everyone ought to oppose. I don't care what your politics are. You ought to be really disturbed by the fact that this regime is acting like a regime, not an administration, and trying to use the awesome power of the federal government against one individual for simply witnessing a protest.
Thank you all. I appreciate it. Thank you, Charles. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Joy. Thank you, Monique. Joy, you're on the Joy Reid Show live when? At 6 o'clock? What are the days?
6 p.m., 6 to 8 p.m. We got to make sure y'all get your whole Don Lemon heads, because the lemon heads be jumping in our chats too. And we make sure that we are free and clear of the Don Lemon Show. But so when Don's done, you can pop on over to thejoyreidshow.com and you can watch me from 6 to 8 p.m. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays.
You know what, Joy? Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And I'm going to do for you, I forget, not that I'm doing it, not that I'm that big, but what Ben Mysalis used to do for me. When he was done at his show at a certain time, I think it was a show, he would send his audience over to me. And so I need to start doing that because, you know, we're all in this together, right?
We're all in this together, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you. So we can find Joy Reid and the Joy all over social media, and the Joy Reid Show on YouTube. We can find Monique all over social media as well, and she is often on this program. Charles Coleman all over social media, and you can find him on this program in his own with you and Mr. Richard Fowler, right?
That's right. Wednesdays at 7:30 on IG Live, Brothers Briefing with myself and Richard Fowler. So come check us out.
And Aaron, president of the NABJ, are you on? What would you like people to seek out, Aaron?
Sure. No, they can follow me on Instagram. NABJ will be convening in Atlanta this summer, August 12th through the 16th. Joy, Don, I know you're going to be there. Monique, I hope you and Charles are going to be there. It is going to be epic, and we are going to be discussing these issues and many, many more. This is a consequential but exciting time for Black journalists in America. We know that without our story, there is no American story.
Where is it this year?
Atlanta. Come on, Don. Come on.
Now you know he's coming now.
I'm Atlanta. It's really going to be Atlanta. Thank you, guys. And Monique, I have it. I told you where you can find Monique. Okay. Monique, thank you.
Noon live on YouTube.
Oh, live on YouTube. Live on YouTube. Yes.
Noon,
okay.
Eastern.
Thank you. Colby, Mr. Mediaite, Colby Hall. Colby writes, he is the founding editor of Mediaite, mediaite.com. Mediaite guarantee. That's zbiotics.com. Everyone, unless you're like a crazy troll and you keep doing stuff over and over, we're going to let you speak. We're going to let you speak. But anyways, like and thumbs up because it's very important. I do have a lot to say, and I am going to talk about it. I usually don't like to talk about this or myself in this manner. And by the way, this is not like some sort of victory lap or anything like that, because I believe this is way more serious and there are broader implications. And if you watch this show to its completion today, you will understand what I mean, because I have people on who can talk about this, what it meant, what it means, and the danger of this going into the future. Okay? So, let me just start out and tell you this, before my preamble, is that I went to Minnesota to report. That was my mission, to report. When I got there, my mission was to report. And when I got there, I reported. And that's what I did. As a reporter, I was not part of any protest group. I am not a protester. I said several times that I am not a protester. I am a journalist. And so some people don't understand what that means. Maybe you don't have enough. Well, I know the Trump administration doesn't have a healthy respect for journalism or journalists, because they attack journalists at every measure. They have been attacking journalists since Donald Trump first came down the escalator and started calling the media the enemy of the people, or fake news, or the fake media. So And they do that because they know the truth is not on their side. The Constitution is not on their side. Donald Trump lies more than he breathes. And members of the Trump administration have taken on that same mantle. They are the same thing. The fish rots from the head. And so that was my intent, was to go and tell you, Lemon Nation, what was happening on the ground. And that's what I said in all of my videos. I'm going because I want to know. It's the same reason I went to Chicago. It's the same reason I went to Ukraine. It's the same reason I reported from India, that I reported from all places, all over the United States, all over the world, presidential elections, from presidents to janitors to secretaries to cleaning ladies to lawyers, whoever. I've interviewed everybody. And that is what journalism is supposed to be about. I believe wholeheartedly, 100% in the First Amendment. And I believe that journalists take an oath, much as doctors and lawyers do, to do no harm. And by doing no harm, that means transparency and exposing people and situations that need to be exposed, and bringing light to a situation. And also just plain old chronicling and recording what is happening in the world. So that is what journalists are supposed to do. And look, and I've got a couple of words for journalists, because more than anything, journalists, I want you to understand this. I know that it is the corporation. It's the corporation that is, or the corporations that have really, really, really done you guys dirty, has done a terrible deed. And I'm going to say something that I haven't said before, okay? Because I usually don't like to talk about in my time at CNN and my departure. I don't even really think about it that much, honestly, because I've moved on and we have built a fantastic community here. And thank you so much. Again, make sure you hit the thumbs up and hit the like and subscribe, okay? So I don't usually like to talk about that, but I was a canary in the coal mine. I saw this coming along. Now, all of the complete honesty, right? I don't know if it gets me in trouble or whatever. You may have heard a whole lot of shit and read a whole lot of shit that was written about me when I left CNN, or just during the last months that I was at CNN. And all of a sudden we get new management that comes in, and then this new narrative about me comes in, that I'm this bad person when I worked there for 16 years and everybody loved me. I gave everybody an opportunity. Women, it didn't matter. If you were new, come on the show. So all of that shit that you heard and wrote about me, that wasn't true. Most of it, if not all of it, was not true. But it was coming from inside of the house, meaning CNN and CNN's PR people, because the parent company did not want me there, because my ideology and the way that I questioned conservatives and the Trump people did not line up with what they wanted. That is the God's honest truth on my mother's life. So all that stuff about, he said this about Nikki Haley, that was not a big deal. What I was saying about Nikki Haley is that that's how society treats women. And I didn't believe in it, but they used that as a predicate to get rid of me, because my ideology and what I believe journalists should do did not line up with what they thought or what they wanted or what they were capitulating to. I kept asking, why are we putting these people on the air who lie all the time? What is what's our rule, our protocol for election deniers? What's our protocol for insurrection deniers or liars? Like what's our policy on that? They never had an answer. We need to make room for Republicans. And we are going to take this person who you are sitting right next to, and we're going to use her to leverage our relationship with Republicans. A quote, I swear to you, on my mom and my life. That is what happened to me. So that is the truth. I'm a journalist. I have to tell the truth. So that's what happened to me at CNN. And so I saw all of this shit coming because I knew from experience that it happened to me. And I was shocked by the people who were so desperate to keep their jobs. I'm talking about management, that they just went along with it. And I said, this is the end right here. Because I looked at that company as the gold standard for journalism. And then when that company came in and said that, they said it before they even got there. They wanted me gone. And I know that for a fact. You know, I know people. I am friends with people who ran that company. They want you gone, Don. Be careful. Because what? Because they want to move the network to the right. And that shit never works. And I told them it would never, ever work. People who watch Fox News are not going to watch you. And so now the same thing or similar thing has happened to CBS. And look at what's happened. The evening news has lost almost a quarter of its audience because not because of journalism. Well, it's because of the lack of journalism. It's because they're not putting the emphasis on journalism. They're putting the emphasis on what? On ideology and trying to take networks into certain directions because they think it's going to get them more viewers. But really what it is because the ideologies of the people that they believe are sitting in those seats are standing out there reporting and anchoring. It doesn't line up with the ideology of the people who are sitting in the boardrooms or the owners. Those rich people, mostly those rich white men, they want to turn on television and see what they think and feel and how they think politically. They want to see that what? Mirrored right back to them. They want to have their beliefs and ideology reinforced and reconfirmed. And they don't want someone like me giving them that news or the news that they don't want to hear. Journalism is about everything, having every conversation without fear or favor. I don't care if I love you or like you or whatever ideologically, if it doesn't play into how I believe, that does not matter. I'm there to report. And so whether someone should be in a certain group, whether a certain group should be in a certain place or not, that is not my job as a journalist to decide. My job is to cover it. There were many people during Black Lives Matter, and when there were protests, and they were saying they should not be protesting here. Now, what if the media had not chronicled that? What if someone said, you can't go, that group over there is in an area that is not cordoned off, and then that group goes over there. Are you going to go, we can't go over there and report this? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Journalists, I hope you're listening to me. I think that journalists need to stand up instead of capitulating. And that is the only way that we're going to get past this moment. You do not capitulate to a bully. In this administration, they are bullies. And so you have to introduce people to the word no. Now, again, this is not just about me. I'm talking about the broader context of this. And I'm going to bring some folks in to talk about that. But this is much bigger than me. We are at a very critical point in the history of this nation. Look at what happens when dictators and authoritarians, look at what happens in Tehran or in Iran, everywhere. When they want to become dictators or authoritarians and take over a country, what do? The first thing they do is get rid of the media. They shut off the radio. They have state-run TV. They have state-run radio. They have state-run newspapers. And that's what's happening right now. Look at what happened at ABC with George Stephanopoulos. George Stephanopoulos talked about Donald Trump and E. Jean Carroll. Now, I mean, some people say maybe his structure wasn't right, but he quoted someone from the Washington Post where a judge said that it was akin to rape. The judge said that, and ABC paid tens of millions of dollars. That's what a judge said from the Washington Post. People are afraid. This is a chill. They're trying to chill journalists. These people want you to report only the things that they want to report. And look, that is not my opinion. Those are the rules. That's the edict of the Defense Department. Ask Pete Hegseth, who made journalists sign papers that they had to have what they were writing or going to release cleared by the agency. Are you kidding me? Are you out of your mind? So news organizations, stop selling out your journalists. Let them report on the news. Stop trying to move the journalism in the direction of Republicans or MAGA or this administration. And if you were trying to do it to the left, I would say the same thing, but that's not what's happening. Nobody's trying to move anything to the left. But you're trying to move things to the right. Not only is it unseemly, it's un-American. And you don't deserve to be journalists or in the business of journalism if you do that. So look, I stand proud and I stand tall. This is not a victory lap for me because it's not over. They're going to try again and they're going to try again. And guess what? Here I am. Keep trying. That's not going to stop me from being a journalist. You're not going to diminish my voice. Go ahead, make me into the new Jimmy Kimmel if you want. Just do it. Because I'm not going anywhere and I'm going to believe the same things, whether you want to, whatever. Now, let me just tell you something else before I get to my guests. None of this is about justice. This is about power, and it's about people who are incompetent. It's not about justice. You know how I know it's not about justice? Because I have the best attorney in the country, I believe, to deal with this, who takes on this administration without fear at all. And this attorney has worked with some of the worst accused criminals in history. And even those people, just like Donald Trump, who is a 34-time convicted felon, are always allowed usually to self-report. In these situations, why you see the activists in Minneapolis or Minnesota, why you see a perp walk, which they were supposed to get rid of that, right? Because they said they were unconstitutional. Why you see that? Because they want those images out there. They want to embarrass people. Same situation. If they had come here to do that, they wouldn't let me self-report. They want to see that. Now, did you see Donald Trump in handcuffs? And he was convicted 34 times and would be convicted even more if he were not president of the United States. And so when I asked counsel and people, well, why is this happening? And one person who I respect the most, this doesn't come from my counsel, who I really respect said, because they're giving you the N-word treatment. Because they want people to know that. Because they have dumbass people who are grifting like Megyn Kelly out there saying, arrest, arrest. And then gay ass Benny Johnson out there, arrest, arrest, arrest. It's like, get out of the closet, Benny. Why don't you get out of the closet and stop? You're in a jail of your own, reportedly, allegedly. Trapped in the closet, reportedly, allegedly. You have people like those two who are out there and they are simply grifting. Megyn doesn't believe that shit. And if she does, she's a very dumb lawyer if she doesn't understand that. And by the way, for people like that, when you're saying this applies to this and this applies to that, yeah, it applies to the protesters. I wasn't a protester. And everybody knew that if my name was in it, that it would be big news. Oh my God, we got this one. And not the people who are on the ground who are doing great work, meaning the journalists who are there, not the protesters. That's a whole different thing. People can protest. They have their First Amendment rights. And they are allowed to protest. But I was not a protester, nor am I a protester. What I do is bring people the story. And that's it. And so, over the last couple of years since I've left CNN, I could have just sat on my laurels. And I said, you know what? I need to have a voice during this election. And so I started the Don Lemon Show on the Don Lemon channel on YouTube. And it has been a learning experience. Everybody's like, oh, you suck. You're not going to do this. We have grown so quickly that YouTube is shocked, that all of our platforms are shocked, that the media industry is shocked. over 1 million subscribers, and that's just on one platform. So I'm very proud of what I've done, and I will always be a journalist, and I will always tell you the truth. I don't care what it is. I will always tell you the truth. When I was at CNN, people used to get mad at me, my Black people, gay people, everybody. Who are you? You're not standing up for us. I'm like, I'm just giving you the truth. I'm sorry if that doesn't line up. I'm sorry. I understand. I get nuance. I get the history of this country. I get that we come from a history of slavery. I get that we come from a history and a present of slavery and homophobia. I get that. Most of the things, if you read the criticism about me, most of it is, just look at it. It's rooted in homophobia and racism. Because you're not used to seeing someone like me do this with authority and a voice and without fear. I'm not afraid. So I hear that Pam Bondi is angry. It doesn't, look, none of that matters to me. And the Megans and the Bennies of the world, that doesn't matter to me. I don't really care about that. But this is just an example. I'm just surprised that someone like Pam Bondi would be angry for someone doing their job, someone abiding by the law. Why would you be angry about that unless you were trying to use it as a weapon rather than to seek the truth and justice? Because you may not like justice, but when justice is served, it is served. And to have the Attorney General of the United States saying that, and I don't look, that's the reporting. I don't know if she is or not, but they're saying she's enraged. It's like, enraged about what? That justice was served? And then so many people today, someone put out a false report about me today saying that I had been arrested or indicted or whatever. And everybody on the internet, Charlie Kirk channel, I don't know who the guy is filling in for Charlie Kirk. Oh, Donald has been, that went on for hours. And my legal people were like, somebody needs to tell them that or we're going to sue them. The same thing with the guy who I used to work with at CNN, Scott Jennings. And we turned it on in here for a minute with my counsel. And I was like, who is this? Like, I knew Scott Jennings when I was at CNN, but I don't know this person. What has happened to him? I don't watch CNN, so I don't know, but he is acting and putting on, it's ridiculous. Anyway, that's all I wanted to tell you guys is thank you for supporting me. Now, I want to go on and talk about what this means for other journalists. And I think that we should support all independent journalists, independent media, and all reporters and journalists who are just doing their jobs. As a matter of fact, when I was in Minnesota, there were protesters who, they loved me, right? Because I'm independent media. But these protesters were yelling at CBS News cameramen. And I stopped them and I said, don't yell at these guys. They're not responsible for the ideology on their network. They're not responsible for the editorial bend on their network. They're out here with a camera shooting what's happening, chronicling what's happening, just like I am. And they need to feed their families and pay their bills. So why are you yelling at them? It doesn't make sense. So I will tell you the truth no matter what. I went there to report. That was my mission. When I got there, my mission was to report. And when I was in the church and wherever, that is my mission, to report. And that is what I did. Okay? That's it. I think I have some guests here, by the way. I've gone on and on. Producers, who do I have? Are they here now? Oh, Colby Hall is here. And Attorney Charles Coleman here as well. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you both for joining me. I didn't think I would go on that long. I was like, we should have the guests come on at 5:20 instead of 5:30 because I'm not going to talk for that long. But anyway, gentlemen, thank you so much. Colby, I want to talk to you about well, first, let me get some of the legal part of it, and I will bring in, let me bring in Charles because I know Charles's time is limited, and also Monique Presley is here, and I want to bring Monique Presley in as well. My legal minds, before we get to the implication about journalism, talk to me about this and what this means for the rule of law, actually for the First Amendment, etc. Why don't you go, Charles?
Well, Don, The first thing that I say is I continue to talk about the fact that America's future is in the hands of the judiciary. And even where this administration seems to look past the rule of law, it is up to the judiciary to make sure that that rule of law is upheld. And so when you have a magistrate judge, for our audiences who don't understand how this works, usually what happens is these sorts of warrants and other sorts of pleadings, whether it's a search warrant, an arrest warrant, they are brought to a magistrate judge. They are assigned to someone who is generally covering a miscellaneous part for the week. And that person will review the various sorts of pleadings that come before them. They are not necessarily going to be the trial judge on that case. They just have this particular assignment for a day or for a week. It's usually a period of about a week. And so the fact that a magistrate judge refused to sign the pleading says a lot about what the pleading did not have in terms of being able to make out what they felt was a prima facie case that would allow for the probable cause necessary in order to effect an arrest. And so the judge essentially said that however this pleading was constructed, whether it was substantively in terms of the actual facts that were alleged as part of the pleading, or whether it was procedurally in terms of the actual construction legally of the pleading, it was insufficient for that judge to sign. Now, here's the reason why that's significant for you, Don, and as for the rest of the audience. That judge, more likely than not, is still going to be on duty in that same part tomorrow. We don't know whether that judge will be on duty next week, but the point is, the fact that this was already blocked by a magistrate judge and already reviewed by a magistrate judge puts the government or whoever it was that was seeking to prosecute this case at an uphill battle, because now you have to structurally provide something that is markedly different than what was already blocked and what was already rejected. So either you have to find new or different facts, or you have to find, or more specific facts, or you have to find new or different charges to allege. Here's why that becomes more of a problem. Presumably, as speaking as a former prosecutor, you don't hold punches with respect to your pleadings. It's not necessarily that you put everything out there, but you lead with your strongest arguments. You lead with your strongest pieces of evidence. So presumably, if you are someone with even a modicum of experience, you put your best stuff in this first pleading. And if it didn't get past the magistrate judge the first time around, it seems very difficult to imagine a world where they are going to be able to substantively keep many of the charges the same and continue to move forward with a different magistrate judge, because at this point, it's been front page news. Everybody knows that you tried to do it this way and it didn't work. So the question immediately becomes, what facts or what charges are you going to allege differently in some renewed attempt to try to move forward with an arrest that you didn't the first time? It's very difficult. It's not impossible, but substantively, this is a significant blow to any sort of arrest or attempt to try and prosecute a case against you. So that is something procedurally that needs to be understood.
Monique.
No, I agree with Charles. I think there are a lot of things to be said about the importance of the First Amendment and a journalist's role. But the first thing that's on my mind today is that we're dealing with a lawless DOJ, and that judges have been very much like lawyers on the other side. ACLU lawyers, legal defense fund lawyers, and people like that have been the ones that have been fighting truly with capes around their necks. And there have been judges who have been willing to do the right thing, or in cases like this, even where defendants don't have lawyers yet to speak up for them, it appears that this judge found what they offered to be completely and totally lacking, like did not pass the smell test for their accusations, but that doesn't mean they won't try again. And so I'm as sober about it today as I was yesterday, and I don't put anything past them. We're going off of stories about what the rationale was and what the reasoning was. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure the lawyers who are directly involved have more information than people like Charles and I who are out here analyzing and opining. But career defense lawyer agrees with career prosecutor that that nobody's sung the last song and the curtain's not down on this case. So it's still a serious matter. And that being said, I believe that the more attention we place on this DOJ, where an attorney general of the freaking United States has time to be giving personal updates on Twitter about arrests, which should be a civil violation at the most, of protesters, and bragging about trying to drag in journalists and include them as agitators, where they're giving blow by blow and play by play. This one's been arrested. This one's been arrested. I'm just wondering how many children have been kidnapped, not detained, but kidnapped right there in Minnesota since this DOJ has been paying attention to what happened on Sunday for 25, 30 minutes. How many Black girls have been trafficked and are missing? How many cold cases they're not following? How many civil rights abuses and wrongful death cases they've withdrawn from? Well, they have all the time in the world to do this fake, phony, fraudulent attack on people who were exercising their right as Americans to free speech in an open space, in a public space, in a church. And it doesn't matter. Whatever's going to get figured out for those protesters, we'll support them too. But at the same time, we had journalists, not just you, Don, but Georgia Fort in there, who's got call after call now with people trying to call her an agitator when she's an award-winning journalist, an independent journalist who has been doing great work on the ground. And so I'm hoping to find that the magistrate judge had similar good sense and restraint where she was concerned, and hoping that nothing happens with her as well. But this is what they have time to do, and it's an abomination for prior attorney generals appointed by Republican presidents and Democrats. We've never seen this manner of foolishness or folly or lawlessness from that office.
I want to bring in now Joy Reid, independent journalist, and also Aaron Haynes, the president of the National Association of Black Journalists. But first, I want to bring in Colby. He's been here waiting patiently. Colby, let's talk about what this means for journalism.
Well, first, I want to thank you for going to Minneapolis and doing great reporting. And thank you for covering the protest in that church. I mean, the evidence that it was journalism that you did is the journalism you did. You interviewed the protesters, but you also interviewed the members of the church, the clergy, and you did so in a dispassionate and entirely respectful and journalistically sound way. I also want to thank you for your courage and bravery in the face of this sort of lawless intimidation tactic, right? And I think this is something that you are rightfully outraged by, and we should all be not concerned. We should all be like alarmed at what's happening right now in this Trump administration. This is, to be clear, this is not law enforcement. It is intimidation, full stop. When the government threatens journalists or critics for doing their jobs, they're not protecting order. It's a warning to stay quiet. And so the worst thing you can do in the face of that is to stay quiet. So kudos to you for not doing that. And we should use you as an example for every other journalist to speak loud and proud about doing their job. The First Amendment exists to protect offensive than critical speeches, right? Like that's the point. It's not there to make sure that people say nice things. It means the right to say things that anger or speak truth to those in power. Weaponizing access and regulation is censorship in disguise. And when press access and approvals depend on some sort of editorial sort of niceties to an administration, that is authoritarianism, and that's when we've lost democracy. And honestly, we need enough is enough. We need people to be freaking out about what this administration is doing across many levels, but in particular towards journalists. So I'm deeply, deeply, deeply alarmed about how you have been treated here and how this just seems to be part of a much more troubling pattern that I don't see abating anytime soon.
Joy Reid, we have very similar paths from corporate media to independent journalists, and you're quickly growing YouTube and show with hundreds of thousands, if not millions of subscribers. What do you make of all of this and this assault on journalism?
Absolutely. Well, I first want to thank the panel for having me. It's great to be with this panel, and thank you, my friend Don Lemon, who I've been texting. Like, I am not Don Lemon's mom or auntie, but I've been texting him like, "Don, are you okay?" Like, I probably feel like I text him once an hour just to make sure no one is coming at him. So I appreciate everything you did. I want to echo every word that Colby said, because had you and I still been working at our corporate media jobs, and I recall being sent to South Carolina to cover the agonistes over bringing down the Confederate flag. And it was a huge fight over that. There were people who literally were all but chaining themselves to the Confederate flag monument and refusing to get away from it because they didn't want that flag brought down. Can you imagine if the protesters on both sides of that issue, if Governor Nikki Haley had said, go and arrest the journalists who I was interviewing, people who were in full regalia of the Confederacy. They were wearing their Confederate uniforms, their throwback uniforms. And we walked up to them and interviewed them because that is our job. When I was there, because I was in the midst of these protests on either side of that issue, that is not a crime. It is literally the job of journalism. And what you've been doing in going to these sites of protest and
church and a house of worship, not because of the premise, but because of the location. And I think that location makes a world of difference to how prosecutors look at the ability to protest. And I'll just say quickly, Stephen A.
Okay.
It's one thing to be in the public street where the government can put on time, place, and manner restrictions, and they can do all sorts of things to give, as long as it's not, content specific, that I'm applying my rules to you. It's neutral. But then private entities, like a business, for example, or private places, they do have some control, in fact, the utmost control over how people can enter and remain. And so it does change the equation when you're inside of a private space.
And that being said, because listen, somewhere along the way, Don Lemon and listen, I don't have any kind of relationship with the man, but I don't want the man thrown in jail, Laura. I don't want to see him thrown behind, but I don't want him getting in that kind of trouble, he is an independent journalist, and it makes sense because obviously he spent 17 years at CNN being a journalist. So we got to give him that. The flip side to it, however, is that he was inside a church, and you see the video where he's talking about them and he's going off about ICE and he's saying a lot of things about folks, and he comes across more of an activist than a journalist, and people are wondering whether or not he's going to catch major heat, because that's the argument that the DOJ is going to try to make? Is that a legitimate argument the DOJ can pull off against them, in your estimation, based on what you've seen?
Well, first of all, I inadvertently wore black and white stripes as if I'm a jailbird right now for this interview. So I want to just say that was totally inadvertent.
You don't look like a jailbird. You don't look like a jailbird, oh, Laura, Coach. Trust me on that. You don't.
I just
Well, go
want
ahead.
to be clear. As I'm looking at myself, I'm saying, did I incite the questioning based on my appearance and wardrobe? It could be.
Not at all.
Having said that,
Not at
you
all.
know what? The stripes look good. But I will
Yes, it
say,
does.
here's an interesting tension, and I'm going to unpack it in two ways. Number
Okay.
one, we know that arguments that suggest that you being a journalist is fatally undermined by your readiness and willingness to offer opinion would have a detrimental precedent across the board, because we know that the evolution in many instances of journalism, where you're providing information, can be construed as, or is actually directed as, at some entities, as opinion journalism, opinionated topic. So I think to suggest that one is no longer a journalist or has the protection of being a part of the free press because they offer an opinion would be detrimental, I think, to many entities, number one. But number two, there is this tension about the presence of the press documenting events in real time, where the obligation of journalists to cover a story doesn't necessarily stop at the closed door. And I give you examples of this. When you have a camera, for example, say inside of the Capitol on January 6th, or you have a camera that's documenting protests along the streets, and while you are within that space, you are documenting around you as a responsible journalist. I myself was wherever the pepper bomb or tear gas, whatever was deployed while on the scene, was impacted and experienced it because I was covering the protest, not a part of the protest. There's a tension there between the allowance of it. But I will say the reason why this presents a particular issue is because of the space. And this is where the FACE Act comes in, Stephen, without going into the details of individual people who may or may not be identified or targeted by law enforcement, according to statements by Secretary Noem and the like. The FACE Act is where everyone's going with this. And that's a fancy acronym, but here's what it means. It means that you're not allowed to threaten or intimidate or use force or other means to try to impact or obstruct somebody's ability to either enter a reproductive health clinic, which is where it really started, or a house of worship. And the reason for that is because you want to have, especially with house of worship, you've got the discussion of the First Amendment, an exercise of one's First Amendment rights. And any tactic that's used to try to suppress or intimidate that, to have a chilling effect on it, can be problematic for the First Amendment. But then you've got that tension of the free press within that same amendment space. So why I look at this as a very unique dilemma for not only one who'd be looking to investigate, but also as a guidance for press going forward. And, a lot of people think they're press because they have a camera in their hand, because I'm documenting, I'm informing. Aren't I a journalist too? There are prescribed guidelines and regulations, but I wonder for the people out there, do you want the press to follow into a space where news is happening, or stop at the door and in order to not risk being identified?
It's a legitimate question.
Sure.
That's a legitimate question, because that's what, I think that if Don Lemon's smart, he listened to you and what you just said and say, hey, that's the news was happening inside, not at the door. That's why I was inside. I mean, that's a good argument. That's something that definitely should be exercised, no doubt about that. I want to know what you can tell us about what legal theories actually apply here. Trespass, disorderly conduct, the FACE Act, the KKK Act, all right, etc. And how do courts balance protest rights with religious freedom and the right to worship without disruption?
Think about it in this way. Your rights end where mine begin. And that's in the public space, let alone the private space. You've ever gone to the movie theater, you've gone to a restaurant, and they'll tell you no shirts, no shoes, no admission, right? Or you can revoke your license of a ticket if you're throwing popcorn at the screen or recording inside the movie theater. I'm telling you, not from personal experience, but what I have heard about, these sorts of things, number one. So you can think about that. A private entity tells you, you ain't got to go home, but you cannot be here. And if you're in my home, you're in my space, it's my rules. So with that in mind, you got to think about these two competing interests. One is everyone's right to be in the quintessential public spaces. I can be on this sidewalk. I can be screaming up to the high heavens my policy differences, the things I think you're doing wrong. I have a right to petition the government to redress my grievances, even if that means that my petition, so to speak, is me holding up a sign in front of the street, in front of the quintessential public forum, the White House, right? That sidewalk. But then there's the private spaces where I am allowed to have some sanctuary. I'm allowed to have some distance between everyone's welcome to, no one can come unless I say so. And so the FACE Act is about that secondary part. It's about saying that we hold, quite in a precious way, we hold it very important to be able to exercise our freedom of worship and beyond, our freedom to access reproductive health clinics, although that's interesting given the course of events in terms of abortion rights in this country, but we still hold the ability to access people with whom we are going to exercise our rights to be private. And you can't come in and trample on those. I had an interesting interview with one of the organizers, Nakima Levy-Warren, who was inside of that church. I interviewed her a couple days ago, and I asked her the question of why she wanted to go inside as opposed to being outside. She relayed to me, and I'll paraphrase her commentary, she relayed to me on air that it was a duty she felt as being a Christian to identify a kind of hypocrisy with being a member of ICE and also being somebody who had a ministerial role inside of the church. And when I questioned her about
what
the
this pastor was being accused of.
Yeah, I questioned her of we accused of, and of course the DHS does not want to confirm or deny the presence of that person as a member of that church because they don't want to dox somebody and they have some privacy interests there. But the idea here of saying I had a right to go in and tell people how I felt and warn people about the fact that one among you is a hypocrite or one among you I don't believe is acting in line with the professed religious beliefs that he says he is. That's what she articulated. Now, I'll tell you why that's exactly something that the investigators in the Civil Rights Division or the investigators of a prosecutor's office are going to hone in on. Precisely why is this reason, Stephen A? And that is, it sounds as if you are trying to impact my ability or influence my ability to be in a space of worship. And the FACE Act, along with the clinics aspect of it, was designed in part to, if not prevent that, to minimize and stop it altogether. So I think you have this investigation that's pending on all these people that will go beyond just what is, said on social media, but also interviewing the members of the actual house of worship, going broadly from what we saw as clips to what actually was the full landscape of it. And I understand from her statements to me that they actually attended the service and then spoke up at what they thought was an appropriate time to condemn. And I do wonder what the impact of having been in attendance will impact.
Quick answer to this question. Is the man in trouble?
You know what? I think when there has been a threat made by the DHS and the Attorney General of the United States that you're on notice, I think that you are right to be concerned. Now, whether that will pan out in terms of their burden of proof and a grand jury agreeing with them, I have no prediction. But you don't want to be, as the former president of the United States, I'm quoting Ronald Reagan here, but said, if you're explaining, you're losing. That's the same in the law. You don't want to be in the position to try to explain what you have done, because then you find yourself in a courtroom.
To remind us why we even having this discussion, why even the stuff happened in St. Paul, it's because of the shooting, the death of Renee Good. And obviously federal officials say the ICE officer who shot her suffered internal bleeding. I didn't see that. I saw it. I'm like, what the hell are they talking about? But either way you slice it, video disputes have fueled public distrust, of course. From a use of force legal standpoint, Laura Coates, what facts matter most? Imminent threat, positioning, timing of shots, etc. And what's the cleanest standard for judging reasonableness when the video is unclear or incomplete?
The phrase kill or be killed. If you feel as though you have to act or you yourself will be killed or have serious bodily harm, officers, because the Supreme Court's deference, have said that we're going to judge that belief whether it's reasonable, according to what another officer who is reasonably in a similar situation might view it. That's important here because they're not judging from what you and I watching this as quote unquote laymen would be, but what other officers might believe, because they are the ones who we expect to make split-second decisions and have experience in these very difficult circumstances. But here's why it's difficult to understand the absence of an investigation of the officer who shot and killed Renee Good, because it's not a hypothetical officer that was on the scene as well. There were other officers on the scene, and they did not, from any vantage point that I have seen, draw, let alone fire their weapons, even though they too would have had a duty to protect another person who was in imminent harm or lethal harm. So that reasonableness standard, I think, in many ways strengthens a need to investigate whether or not that officer was reasonable to believe kill or be killed. And by the way, Stephen A., that's for every single shot that was fired, not just the first one.
Right.
It's every single shot. And finally, when you cannot know the intent in someone's mind, because he's not going to say what he was believing and thinking, you have to look at what they do after as well as part of consciousness of guilt. Did the officer who fired the weapon, believing he was in lethal harm's way, or that the community would be harmed with this person going, what did the officer do after to ensure that the threat that he believed was neutralized? Did he follow the car? Did he attempt to render aid? Did he attempt to understand whether the person had a weapon on them? Was that vehicle going to be used to harm somebody else, according to him? Did other officers do that? Or was it a matter of shooting out of reasonableness or anger? That's all part of what should be an investigation.
Insurrection Act. I wanted to get to this because I've seen you covered, you've covered talk of invoking the Insurrection Act in response to unrest. What are the legal thresholds a president has to meet, according to your knowledge, and what would be the bright line / red flags, per se, that signal it's being used as a political tool rather than a lawful last resort public safety measure?
When you think of the Insurrection Act, you want to think about an overwhelming emergency where the local law enforcement cannot control it. It has become so problematic as to overwhelm the presence of law enforcement or be so overwhelming in number, force, or threat or scope such that the local law enforcement cannot reasonably be expected to control it. I mean, you can think back in the civil rights era, it was invoked at that point in time, not at the request of a governor, when you had people trying to ensure that segregation.
It's interesting to me that he's lying about it. I think he's scared. I don't think he realized that he was breaking federal laws when he entered that church and disturbed people in their place of worship, intimidating them, and part of the crew that was physically obstructing them. Right. I don't think he understood. And I think now he understands there actually is a real chance that he's going to be in serious legal trouble, especially if he gets charged under that Klan Act, because now we're talking felony. At a minimum, he trespassed. However, trespass is not a federal crime. So what are the odds of him getting charged for that by Minnesota officials? So it's got to be one of these federal crimes, which means it's likely serious. And we'll see whether or not they have him. It actually is fact specific. They're going to be looking at how much he did that sounded more like protester versus how much he did that sounded more like journalist. But he's lying about his behavior, which is a tell. He went on the crazy podcast of that very angry, weird-faced woman, Jennifer, what's her name?
Welch?
All she does is yell. Yeah, thank you. All she does is yell hateful things about Republicans, and I guess that's her shtick. Here he is. Listen. He claims he didn't know that he and his cabal were going to a church. Listen for it. It's not one.
They said, well, there's this thing happening that they've been sending out flyers for. Perhaps you want to cover this. So I said, sure. And I went, okay, I'll cover. And then when I went to cover it, they said, we're doing this this protest that is sort of similar to the civil rights movement, where they show up places and they sort of disrupt the peace, like sitting in at lunch counters or, drinking out of water fountains that were only supposed to be for white people. And I said, sure, I'll go, I'll chronicle it. And they ended up at a church. I didn't even know they were going to a church. And they ended up at a church. And so once they went in and did their thing, other journalists started going in, and I went in. So I'm not exactly sure, Jen, how I became the face of it, unless they just think I'm the bigger name, but it's bizarre. And I reported on it. I interviewed everyone there, the pastor, some of the congregants, and the protesters. And that was it. And now all of a sudden it blew up into this big thing where I am the one who is leading the protest, and somehow I'm the agitator here when I'm just the journalist.
Okay, let me make a couple points before I play you the soundbite of him before he went in. He didn't. Oh, and I just documented it. No one wanted to talk to him. The pastor made clear, no one wants you here. No one wants to talk to you.
Get out.
Put your stupid mic away and get out.
Yeah.
So he knew very well. He wasn't just there. I was innocently documenting. No, you were part of the harassment. You were pushing that mic into the faces of people who did not want you there, and you had no right to be there, and they had every right to eject you. And your harassment continued. But here, as for his claim that I had no idea we were going to a church, listen to him before the protest began on Sunday morning on site, SOT 2.
As Nakima said, this is a clandestine operation. And then we can tell you what's going to happen after. We don't know what's happening. We kind of do, but we don't know how it's going to play out. Okay,
They're not there yet.
We are here. Now, do you think if you just have it, I think maybe if you just have it on the church, but if they see me.
On the what, Don?
They're going to know.
Yeah.
No?
It just depends.
What?
Don't name the location.
I'm not naming the location, but I mean, I'm just wondering if you see me. The folks inside see me.
Are the congregants really on live instead of in service right now?
No, but they'll be like, "Why is Don Lemon here?"
Oh yeah, Sunday morning.
Sunday morning church.
Yeah. Okay, we'll see.
They'll be like, he's. Well, what else? It's Sunday, and we already said the church.
No, we didn't.
Yes, you said it.
Okay. They didn't name the church, James, but they said repeatedly
The church,
at the church,
the congregants,
has the service started. And this idiot let him get away with, I didn't even know we were going to a church throughout that interview. So he's trying to rehabilitate himself by lying, which shows a consciousness of guilt.
Right. Almost every crime that is committed gets escalated when intent is involved. Intent, conspiracy, these things are very serious when a person has a plan in mind that is not what they try to make it appear when the event takes place. If a person says, I'm going to defend my household, and they stand outside and they're looking for trouble, and they make comments and wiseacre comments about shooting people in their houses and so on, you have to be very careful about those things, because they sometimes can indicate intent, and other times just frustration and so on. Look, this was an operation. It's operation. It sounds like he's in Delta Force. He's just such he's just such a buffoon.
Okay.
But the bottom line is, the last person you want to turn into a martyr is this ridiculous clown. Okay, he's just a ridiculous person, and you don't want to turn him into a martyr, but you do want to make it clear something Michael Knowles said yesterday on your podcast that was so right. You have to stand up and enforce the law, and you have to be tough about it. You don't like it? Too bad. You're going to go to jail. Look, our drug problem is killing thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of Americans, okay? Our drug problem is our immigration problem. Our immigration problem is a Democrat strategy to stay alive as a political party. You know where they don't have a drug problem? Singapore. They catch you with drugs, they cut your head off, okay? Or hang you, whatever they do over there.
That'll do it.
That
would do it. That would put an end to it right quick.
There are times. Look, years and years ago, there's a movie that was written based on a book by George Higgins called "The Friends of Eddie Coyle," and in it, these guys decided they're going to heist a bank or something. I can't remember what the crime was. And one of the guys, they give Robert Mitchum, who plays Eddie Coyle, a machine gun. I think I'm not remembering it just right, but the point being, in Massachusetts, for years, it may still be the law, if you committed a crime with a machine gun, it was unequivocal, mandatory, not up to the discretion of some liberal judge, mandatory life imprisonment without parole, without exception, in every case. That's it. You're going to jail till the day you die.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Even the mafia, they didn't use machine guns. If they don't use a machine gun, geez, what are you, crazy? If we get caught, that's it. We're done. There's no way out. Now, in Chicago, where you have a mass murder every weekend, with these gangs shooting each other, they have a thing called a giggle switch on their Glocks. It's a Glock switch. It's a switch you can put on your handgun. You squeeze the trigger, and if you have a 30-round magazine, you can rip off 30 rounds like a machine gun. And they do it all the time. It's like they use them all the time now. The police are up against these lunatics with basically machine guns. But nobody enforces that law with any force. You start enforcing the law. Look, look. How many times do we watch Kamala
Now's the
Harris?
time.
Kamala.
We're going to get him. We're going to disrupt him. Idiot. It's straight out of the stupid criminal files, right? Like that we used to put on cable and people used to do in like comic strips. Anyway, here is the start of the protest for you to judge for yourselves. You will hear Ms. Levy Armstrong talking at the pastor, and that's the right way to put it. And then the chants and the demands begin.
That the Lord is safe in your house, the faith of you all to get your house in order. That is correct.
They're already walking down the aisles on their feet. You can hear her.
Renee Gunn! Renee Gunn!
Oh, there's our friend, Mr. Kelly.
Renee Gunn! Shame on you! Where are you? Where are you? Where are you? Where are your people? Why are you not at Wimble every day fighting for the humanity, standing for our people? Where are you? You drink your coffee, you got your jewelry, you have your nice clothes, but what do you do? What do you do to stand for your Somali and Latino communities? I'm not going to comment. You have no comment, exactly.
He's in the face of this young parishioner saying, I'm not going to comment. I don't have to fucking talk to you, you cretin. But behind him, we just noticed this as we were getting the video ready for today. You see three young people holding each other in a circle, like scared. Which is exactly what Nakima wanted. Enjoy your strip search. Who's scared now? You can hear the pastor say, you better get out, to one of the protesters. In that very soundbite we just played, he says, you better get out. Let me just make it perfectly clear. This was trespass from the moment they stepped into that church planning to disrupt. Who's invited onto this private property? Parishioners wanting to pray. That's not what they were doing. You cannot show up there and have a little wiffle ball game. You cannot show up there for a square dance. And you cannot show up there to disrupt them with shouts of hands up, don't shoot. That is not an acceptance of the invitation to show up and worship. Okay, so you trespassed from the first step into the church, all of you, Don Lemon included, and you really trespassed with zero ambiguity once you were told to get out, which you were repeatedly. They're not going to be charged with trespass because it's a state crime. And we all know that Minnesota authorities have zero interest in enforcing the criminal law against anyone affiliated with BLM. In fact, they used that group to railroad Derek Chauvin into prison. And certainly not against this group because they're on the side of the anti-ICE protesters. Okay, but that's just one of the many crimes that they committed. And they did commit conspiracy against rights, the people's rights, who are cowering in fear, holding on to one another, children crying in the pews. You absolutely did, you accused felon, Nakima. And here's what we know about this woman. Nakima Levy Armstrong. According to Fox News, she's currently the CEO of a cannabis company called Dope Roots. And from 2019 to 2024, she led an anti-poverty nonprofit. You know, those are big in Minneapolis. Perhaps you've heard, called the Wayfinder Foundation. During that time, Ms. Armstrong received over $1 million in compensation. The organization doled out approximately $700,000 in grants. Got it? Let me tell you something. This is so common. You got to really look into any organization that you donate to. This is why I never just dole out money when like somebody asks me on the street or like somebody's like, oh, whatever, let me get something started. I will only give to organizations that I've actually looked into because here's what happens. Somebody says, I need to support myself. I'm going to create a charity and I'm going to give to whatever cause, pick the cause. But my salary is going to be $500,000 a year. So let's say they earn, $750,000 they get in donation $750,000 that first year. So $250,000 goes to a worthy cause potentially, and $500,000 goes to line their pockets because they want to be kept in a certain manner of living. And that certainly appears to have been the case with Ms. Armstrong, who, again, over the past few years took in $1 million in salary. I think it's over 6 years, and donated $700,000. So she made $1 million. She donated $700,000. And that calculation is off, my friends. It's way off. For salary to take up, 65% of the money you take in? We look to make sure it's like less than 15%. And this person said, 65%? I'm just doing my math in the back of the envelope. This is disgusting, okay? She's a con woman. That's clearly what she is. And she certainly had no worries about living in poverty, thanks to her grift. As for the second woman under arrest, you'd be excused if you saw them in a side-by-side of thinking they were identical twin sisters. It's another enormous black woman, and this one has a receding hairline. I'm just giving it to you straight, listening audience, of what we're looking at. She's got glasses, too. Chantel Allen. She's a community organizer and an elected member of the St. Paul School Board. Are any sane people still living in Minneapolis, St. Paul? Doesn't St. Paul pride itself on being the more sane one of the Twin Cities? How do you have this woman on your school board? Explain that to me. You still got a mass of people that voted for her? It's unbelievable. She has a role in educating children and deciding on what children learn in schools. She's also, you'll be shocked to learn, listed as a founder of Black Lives Matter Twin Cities on her LinkedIn profile. It's no wonder they stood up there with a hands up, don't shoot, hands up, don't shoot. That's what they were chanting. Like we pointed out yesterday. Here she is, by the way. Here's Ms. Allen at the protest making the hands up, don't shoot gesture with children in the pews. As we pointed out yesterday, what do those children know about hands up, don't shoot? Nothing. What they see is people saying hands up, don't shoot. They're talking about shooting in a church and your hands up. You could excuse any child for not understanding that reference and misunderstanding it as a threat, a direct threat, mentioning shooting and get your hands up. These absolute disgusting, vile narcissists in there without a care for anybody but their own egos. They don't care about the people being arrested by ICE. Come on. Does anyone actually believe that? They want to make themselves stars. It's people like Patrice Cullors, one of the founders of BLM, who wants to line her own pockets with home after home after home. She wants to get rich off of usually white women's ridiculous, misplaced empathy and privilege, guilt over their privilege, while she rides it to the bank. And Miss Allen here clearly is one of them. You can also see her in the background as her buddy Nakima Armstrong speaks because she wants to be on camera. They all want to be a star. Well, now you are on camera, and you're going to be on another camera soon. It's called a mugshot. I look forward to celebrating it. But here's Armstrong talking to Lemon with the third lady in the back.
And that's why we're here, demanding justice for Renee Good and letting them know that this will not stand. They cannot pretend to be a house of God while harboring someone who is directing ICE agents to wreak havoc upon our community and who killed Renee Good. No, he's one of us.
Okay. They're all such idiots. They cannot pretend to be a house of God. I mean, she makes it very explicit that she is there attacking them based on their religious observance. Like, this woman is effed. They're all going down. They're all going down. This is so satisfying. God bless Pam Bondi. God bless Harmeet Dillon. God bless Kash Patel. You guys, you go. Keep going. This is what we need to see. Accountability for the lawlessness that we have seen time and time again on the progressive left. They are out of control. They are ruining this country. And as I said on Monday, they crossed a red line going into that church. And now they will be forced to pay. can't wait for the mugshot for those ladies who love seeing their mugs on camera. And by the way, Don Lemons won't be far behind. Here now to react is Allie Beth Stuckey. She's the host of the Relatable podcast. Don't miss a moment. Subscribe to this show on YouTube and follow me on Insta, Facebook, and X. Feeling sluggish, bloated, not quite like yourself? Don Lemons won't be far behind. Here now to react is Allie Beth Stuckey. She's the host of the Relatable podcast.